The air was thick with frost, every breath she took turning to smoke in the dim, humming space. Her trembling fingers clawed at the steel door, leaving streaks of desperation on the icy surface. She was barefoot, her swollen belly rising and falling rapidly as panic surged through her. Frost formed on her lashes, tiny icicles clinging to her hairline. Her nightgown, once soft and silken, now clung damp and useless to her shivering body. The silence was broken only by the steady hum of the freezer's compressor and the soft, muffled sound of her cries, too faint to reach anyone outside. She beat the door with what little strength she had, her voice cracking into gasps as her body started to weaken. There was no handle inside, no escape, and no mercy in the cold. She wasn't just fighting for herself. She was fighting for the baby inside her, innocent, still, and utterly helpless. Her breath quickened, her teeth chattered, and she slid slowly down the wall, knees folding under her. For a moment, she closed her eyes, surrender tempting her like a warm lie. But then the scene shifted. Bright lights. A gleaming stage. A live broadcast sign flashing red. The camera zoomed in on a radiant woman standing center stage in a sleek, powerful dress. Her eyes, once dim with suffering, now burned with purpose. The crowd was on edge. Every viewer at home watched, drawn in by her magnetism. There was a pause, thick with tension. Then her voice, calm, strong, commanding, cut through the silence. "Months ago," she said, "I was locked in a freezer, left to die by the man who vowed to love and protect me." Gasps echoed. The world leaned closer. This wasn't just a woman telling a story. It was the beginning of a reckoning that would bring a billionaire to his knees. Sophia Carter's life sparkled under the camera flashes, polished and pristine, the envy of millions. Married to Damon Carter, one of the youngest self-made billionaires in America and the face behind the Carter Lux Hotel empire, she had everything society deemed enviable. Their estate was a sprawling architectural marvel perched on a cliffside, complete with a glass elevator, infinity pool, and private helipad. Magazine covers praised their power couple glow, and paparazzi snapshots caught them smiling at charity galas, walking hand in hand at film premieres, and shopping for baby clothes in designer boutiques. Sophia, 6 months pregnant, had become a symbol of elegance and maternal bliss, with glowing skin and an effortless smile. But that smile had learned to lie. Behind the fortress-like gates of their estate, Damon's love came with rules. His charm, so intoxicating in public, dissolved into sharp coldness in private. He monitored what she wore, how she spoke, even how she laughed. He insisted it was all for her benefit, that the world was watching, that the Carter name must remain untarnished. At first, Sophia had mistaken his attention for care. But slowly, she started to notice the cracks. The way he would tighten his grip on her arm during arguments. How he would belittle her opinions during private dinners. The endless silence when she needed comfort. And how he never once spoke to the baby growing inside her. He had a strange detachment from the pregnancy, never joined her for checkups, never asked how she felt. Instead, he obsessed over press appearances and sponsorships, ensuring every moment of their lives looked perfect to the world. Sophia, who had once dreamed of building a warm home filled with laughter and love, now moved like a carefully programmed doll through their scripted life. She started waking up at night, heart racing, haunted by a sense that something darker lurked beneath his surface. It wasn't just neglect anymore. It was calculation. A sense that Damon didn't see her as his wife, but as a part of his brand. The pregnancy, the marriage, the house, they were props in his carefully curated empire. And she, once so in love, began to feel like a prisoner trapped behind velvet curtains and polished smiles. One afternoon, as she wandered through the nursery alone, running her fingers over a plush toy giraffe, she caught a glimpse of herself in the mirror. The designer gown, the styled hair, the painted-on calm, it all looked beautiful, but unfamiliar. She didn't recognize the woman staring back. And in that quiet, chilling moment, Sophia felt the first deep flicker of fear, not just for her own future, but for the child she was bringing into Damon Carter's gilded cage. It was supposed to be an ordinary evening. Sophia had just returned from a prenatal yoga session, trying to calm the waves of anxiety that had become her constant companion. She entered the grand foyer quietly, rubbing her lower back, and paused when she heard Damon's voice drifting from his office down the hall. The door was ajar, the light on. She hadn't intended to eavesdrop, but something in his tone, soft and unfamiliar, made her feet freeze on the marble. "I miss you," he said. "I can't stand being around her anymore. She's dull. Predictable. A walking baby factory." Sophia's heart sank. Her hand instinctively rested on her belly. Then came a laugh, a woman's voice, high and mocking. "She's just dead weight, Damon. You need someone who understands you. Who's worthy of the Carter name. Not some barefoot wife playing house." Juliet. His assistant. The one with the surgically perfect face, always dressed in heels and red lipstick, whose perfume lingered on Damon's collars too often. Sophia had long suspected there was something between them, but Damon had always dismissed her concerns with a scoff. "You're hormonal," he'd say. "Paranoid." Now, standing outside his office, she heard the truth unfold in cruel clarity. Tears burned behind her eyes as she quietly backed away, her breath shallow, her mind spiraling. She waited until after dinner to confront him, carefully choosing her words. But Damon was ready. His face shifted instantly from indifference to outrage. "You were spying on me," he snapped. "That's how little you trust me? I work day and night to build a future for us and this baby, and you accuse me of cheating because of a stupid voice on the phone." He twisted the facts so expertly that Sophia faltered. Maybe she had misunderstood. Maybe she was being irrational. Damon's calm, calculated denial made her feel foolish for even bringing it up. He stroked her hair with icy affection. "You need rest," he murmured. "Your hormones are making you unstable." From that night on, everything changed. Juliet's presence grew bolder. She began showing up at the house more often, bringing Damon lunch, staying late for urgent business meetings. Sophia noticed her clothes hanging in the guest room closet. A lipstick tube in the master bathroom drawer. One morning, she even caught Juliet in her robe, sipping espresso in the sunroom like she belonged there. "What are you doing here?" Sophia asked, voice low and sharp. Juliet didn't flinch. She simply smirked and said, "Getting comfortable. You won't be around much longer." The venom in her words chilled Sophia more than any freezer ever could. And when Damon refused to acknowledge the growing invasion, even accusing Sophia of being jealous and dramatic, she realized she was being slowly erased. Not physically, not yet, but emotionally, mentally, bit by bit. Juliet had already moved into her space. Now she was trying to move into her identity. The mask Damon wore for the world was beginning to crack, but in private, he remained unervingly composed. With Juliet constantly in his ear, feeding him poison about Sophia's erratic moods and emotional breakdowns, he began crafting the perfect narrative, one that would justify removing her from his life entirely. Not with a divorce. Not with scandal. But with silence. Complete, irreversible silence. He started small, planting seeds of doubt in their circle. To business partners, he mentioned Sophia's mood swings. To staff, he muttered about her mental exhaustion. He told her own doctor that she'd been hallucinating. When Sophia overheard a housemaid whispering that Mrs. Carter was slipping, her heart clenched. She tried defending herself, tried speaking up, but her words bounced off the carefully constructed wall Damon had built around her. He was orchestrating her fall, and the world was already half convinced. Then came the invitation. Damon appeared unusually gentle one afternoon, smiling as he rubbed her belly. "Let's get away for a night," he said softly. "Just the two of us. One last little escape before the baby comes." His sudden sweetness sent warning bells through Sophia's mind, but she was exhausted, isolated, and a piece of her still clung to hope. Maybe this was him trying again. Maybe the man she married still existed. They arrived at one of his luxury boutique hotels just outside the city. Damon had reserved the presidential suite, lavish, empty, eerily quiet. He poured her tea from a polished silver pot as she sank into the velvet couch, watching the fire flicker. Juliet was nowhere in sight, and for a moment it felt safe. But only for a moment. The tea had a bitter aftertaste. Strange, metallic. She mentioned it, but Damon brushed it off with a smile. New herbal blend, he said. Good for the baby. Minutes later, the room began to spin. Her limbs felt heavy. Her vision blurred. She tried standing but collapsed into his arms. Her last memory before blacking out was Damon's face above her, expressionless, cold as stone. When she woke, she was surrounded by metal and frost. Her breath came out in visible puffs. Panic surged as she tried to move, her fingers stiff and numb. Her body, now more vulnerable than ever, was clad only in a paper-thin maternity gown that offered no protection from the bitter cold. The floor was slick with ice. The walls shimmered with frost. A sharp fluorescent light buzzed above. It didn't take her long to realize where she was, a commercial walk-in freezer. She screamed until her throat burned, pounded her fists on the steel door, cried out for her baby, for someone, anyone, to help. But only the low hum of refrigeration answered her. A red blinking camera in the top corner flickered. She followed it with her eyes. Was someone watching? Yes. In the surveillance room just 2 floors up, Damon stood with a glass of bourbon in hand, eyes locked on the screen. Beside him, Juliet laughed quietly, resting her head on his shoulder. Her hand traced circles on his chest as if they were watching a movie, not a woman freezing alive. She'll be gone by morning, Juliet whispered. Damon took a sip of his drink, his eyes never leaving the screen. Good. The cold cut through Sophia like knives, each breath turning into razor-sharp fog as she dragged herself to the door again. Her palms burned from pounding on the steel, but no one came. Her voice cracked, gone hoarse from screaming. Every corner of the freezer was coated in frost, a deadly stillness settling over the space like a shroud. Her knees trembled. She couldn't feel her toes. Her belly ached from the cold, from the stress, from fear. And still, she held on. She curled into a corner and wept, just for a moment. It wasn't weakness. It was the grief of betrayal, the fear for her child, the disbelief that the man she once trusted with her life had left her to die like this. But when the tears dried on her cheeks and the ache in her limbs turned into dull numbness, something inside her shifted. Survival was no longer a choice, it was a vow. She blinked hard, scanning the space. Then she saw it, a small metal panel near the ceiling, likely part of the ventilation system. It was secured with screws, slightly rusted, barely visible behind frost. Her fingers trembled as she reached up. Nothing in the room was sharp. Nothing but her earrings. With shaking hands, she unclipped one and used the sharp post to scrape at the first screw. It was slow, agonizing. Her hands stiffened quickly in the cold, but she refused to stop. Every turn of the screw felt like a battle. She saw flashes in her mind, her mother scrubbing dishes at midnight to feed her, a young Sophia shielding her baby brother during storms, the years she worked 3 jobs just to put herself through school. She had survived too much to die in a freezer. Not like this. Not as someone's discarded secret. The screw dropped. One down. She kept going, each movement fueled by the fire that had lived in her all along. When the last screw clinked to the floor, she pried the panel open. Frigid air rushed down the shaft. It was narrow, lined with frost and ductwork, but it was a way out. Gritting her teeth, she hoisted herself up. The metal bit into her knees and elbows, but she crawled forward, inch by inch, gasping from the effort. Her belly pressed against the sides, slowing her progress, but she never stopped. When her body screamed, she pushed harder. When darkness swam at the edge of her vision, she bit down and blinked it away. After what felt like an eternity, she saw light. A grated opening near the bottom of the shaft led to a loading dock behind the hotel's industrial kitchen. With one final heave, she kicked at the grate. It gave way. She tumbled out, hitting the concrete with a thud. Her body shook violently, her breath rattled, but she was alive. A janitor outside smoking a cigarette dropped it when he saw her. "Jesus, call an ambulance," he shouted to someone inside, running over with his coat. The hotel staff rushed into chaos. Sophia was rushed to the hospital, hypothermic and weak, but conscious. Her baby's heartbeat, miraculously, was still strong. Meanwhile, Damon held a press conference. "My wife has been unwell," he told the cameras, his voice steady, rehearsed. "She's been struggling with severe pregnancy-related paranoia. We've been trying to help her, but she ran off. I just hope she gets the treatment she needs." And the world believed him. For now. Bright lights burned behind her eyelids as she slowly opened them. Beeping machines, the smell of antiseptic, and a tangle of 4 lines greeted her return to consciousness. For a moment, she was disoriented. Then the memories came crashing in: metal walls, frostbitten fingers, the tight squeeze of a ventilation shaft. Her body tensed, as if still expecting the cold to consume her. But it was warm here. Safe. A nurse leaned over her gently, checking her vitals. "You're lucky," the nurse whispered. "And strong. That baby's heartbeat hasn't wavered once." Tears welled in Sophia's eyes. She managed a weak nod. Alive. Her baby was alive. That single truth anchored her in the storm. Within hours, the police arrived. 2 detectives stood at her bedside, notepads in hand, voices filled with professional detachment. She told them everything: Damon's manipulation, Juliet's involvement, the drugged tea, the freezer. Every detail poured out of her, raw and trembling. But their faces remained tight. "Do you have any evidence, Mrs. Carter?" one asked. "Witnesses? Video footage?" Sophia blinked. Of course there wasn't. Damon had made sure of that. The officer sighed. "We'll open an inquiry, but with no physical proof and your husband standing, it's going to be difficult." She realized then that Damon's web of influence reached far beyond the luxury hotel walls. He had planted the narrative of her instability so thoroughly that even the law was hesitant to believe her. By the end of the week, news outlets reported her mental breakdown and praised Damon for his grace under personal tragedy. Tabloids ran images of him looking devastated on his hotel balcony, while headlines speculated about Sophia's health. Some believed her. Many didn't. Others just didn't care. So she vanished. With the help of a kind nurse and a quiet legal advocate who believed her story, Sophia checked out of the hospital under a new identity. She left no trace. No forwarding address. Just silence. A ghost slipping through the cracks of the media storm. Months passed. She now lived in a modest lakeside cottage hours outside the city with a retired journalist couple named Peter and Lillian Hartley. They'd heard her story through a friend and offered shelter, not pity. Lillian brought her warm soup and soft blankets. Peter offered his old office space and gently reminded her every day that she still had a voice. Sophia began to heal. Her body, though weakened, responded well. Her baby, her little girl, grew strong with each passing week. And as her belly rounded and her cheeks regained color, so did her will. She wasn't broken. Just waiting. During late-night walks by the lake, she began to plot. Not vengeance for herself, but justice for every woman like her who had been silenced. She wrote pages of memories, of truths, of every lie Damon had fed the world. She listed names, dates, patterns. She didn't know how yet, but she knew she would rise. Not just as a survivor, but as a mother, a witness, and soon, a reckoning. Her time in the cold had nearly killed her. But now, she burned with purpose. Sophia had always been clever, but now she was something else entirely. Focused, calculating, determined. No longer the elegant shadow that once lingered behind Damon Carter, she was now the mind behind something bigger than revenge. She wasn't just coming back. She was building a storm, one piece at a time. It started with a name scribbled on an old hotel invoice, a man named Eli Moreno, a former security technician who had worked for Carter Lux until he was abruptly fired 6 months before Sophia's disappearance. After weeks of searching, she found him living in a cramped apartment above a mechanic's shop, bitter and broke. At first, Eli didn't want to talk. But when she looked him in the eye and said, "I know what Damon did, and I know he ruined you too," something inside him cracked. Eli confessed that he'd seen something odd during his last week, a deleted security file labeled Deep Freeze. It had disappeared just before he was dismissed. With Sophia's encouragement and some technical help from a freelance coder she'd met through Peter, Eli dug into the hotel's old backup servers. After days of encrypted files and sleepless nights, they found it. Grainy footage from the security feed. Damon standing in the freezer doorway, watching with cold detachment as Sophia screamed behind the glass. The video was short, low resolution, but real. It was enough. Next came Juliet's ex, Marcus Vallon, a high-profile art dealer Damon once tried to ruin. Marcus had spent months nursing a grudge after Juliet publicly dumped him to climb Damon's corporate ladder. When Sophia called, he didn't hesitate. "I've waited a long time to destroy that smug bastard," he said with a grin. He handed over private messages, photos, even a recording of Juliet laughing about burying the wife in a freezer. All pieces to the puzzle. But Sophia knew evidence alone wouldn't be enough. Damon had crafted his empire with stories, glossy, glamorous illusions. To tear him down, she needed to master the same tools. That's where Camille Reyes came in, a bold, sharp-witted television producer known for her viral exposés and dramatic live broadcasts. When Camille read Sophia's story, she didn't blink. "If you're ready to go to war," she said, "I'll hand you the microphone." 4 weeks, Sophia trained. Voice modulation, posture, delivery. Every second of her future on-camera appearance was rehearsed and sculpted. Camille turned her into a force. Not a victim, but a storm in heels and silk, with a voice like steel wrapped in velvet. They picked the battlefield carefully. The Global Business Icon Awards. An annual spectacle Damon not only sponsored but dominated. He was scheduled to receive an award for Entrepreneur of the Decade, and he'd be attending with Juliet, now proudly referred to as his future wife in press circles. Camille pulled strings to secure Sophia a presenter's slot, anonymous, buried in the script, but timed perfectly. Sophia stared at her reflection in the mirror the night before the awards, hand resting on her now-born daughter's sleeping form beside her crib. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about reclaiming her name, her voice, and every truth Damon had tried to freeze into silence. The storm had gathered. And tomorrow, it would strike live. The night shimmered with gold and glass, the Global Business Icon Awards, unfolding inside one of Manhattan's most opulent ballrooms. The stage glittered under spotlights, flanked by massive LED screens and an audience packed with CEOs, influencers, celebrities, and international press. Everyone who mattered was there, including him. Damon Carter stepped onto the red carpet with all the arrogance of a man who believed he owned the world. Dressed in a tailored tuxedo, his signature smirk was in full force. Juliet clung to his arm, radiant in a skin-tight silver gown that mirrored the camera flashes exploding around them. Reporters swarmed, shouting questions, showering compliments. "Mr. Carter, how does it feel to be this year's icon of the decade?" "Juliet, is it true you two are engaged?" He laughed, modestly of course, one hand on Juliet's waist. "It's an honor," he said. "Hard work pays off." Sophia stood just inside the side curtain of the stage, watching it all unfold on the monitor. Her badge read presenter, segment 9, a role Camille had secured under an alias. She wore a sleek black jumpsuit, her hair pulled into a clean twist, and makeup that softened her features just enough to look unfamiliar from a distance. Her heart thudded against her ribs like a drum, her breaths deep and measured. Underneath her calm exterior, fire surged. The baby monitor in her small backstage purse blinked quietly. Her daughter was resting soundly with Lillian just blocks away. Sophia's palms were damp. She clenched and unclenched her fists as she listened to the rhythm of the show. Segment after segment passed. Jokes, speeches, applause. The crowd was warm and dazzled. Damon sat front row center, laughing like a man who had never known consequence. Behind his calm exterior, he was completely unaware that everything he'd built was moments away from collapse. An earpiece clicked in her ear. Camille's voice came through. Segment 9 in 60 seconds. You're up next. You've got this, Sophia. Sophia inhaled sharply, rolled her shoulders back, and stepped toward the wings. The backstage crew gave her a quick nod as they prepped the mic. The host's voice echoed in the background. Up next, a tribute to legacy and leadership, brought to us by a special guest presenter. She stared past the curtains, toward the stage that had showcased men like Damon for years. Men who hurt and smiled and thrived without ever being questioned. Tonight, she would change that. The lights. The world. All of it was ready. Her story had been buried under frost and silence, but now it was burning to break free. Her baby kicked softly as if sensing what was coming. Sophia stepped into the spotlight. The stage was quiet as Sophia stepped into the spotlight, the microphone in her hand trembling ever so slightly. The crowd waited politely, unaware that history was about to pivot under their feet. Behind her, the screen glowed with the official seal of the awards show, the words, "A tribute to visionary leadership," shining in gold. Damon Carter, seated confidently in the front row with Juliet on his arm, leaned back in his chair, sipping champagne with the smugness of a man being celebrated on his throne. "Good evening," Sophia began, her voice smooth, steady. "Tonight, we celebrate innovation, empire building, and legacies. We honor the icons who shaped industries and changed lives." Damon smiled, nodding in agreement. But then he froze, his eyes narrowing. Sophia continued, her voice now tinged with quiet steel. "But sometimes, the legacy we honor is a lie. Sometimes, behind every great man, is a woman buried under his silence. I would know, because I was that woman." A murmur swept through the room. Heads turned. Whispers rose like wind. Damon straightened in his seat, blinking, unsure if he had heard correctly. Juliet's hand twitched in his. "My name is Sophia Carter." Gasps erupted. Flashbulbs popped as reporters raised their phones. The audience stirred, some visibly confused, others visibly shaken. "You may know me as the missing wife of tonight's honored guest," she said, her gaze locking on Damon's pale face. "But I didn't disappear. I was hidden. I was silenced. I was left to die in a freezer while the man I loved watched and walked away." Chaos rippled through the ballroom. Damon bolted from his seat, rushing toward the stage. "Cut her mic," he barked at the tech crew. "She's lying. She's not well. Get her out of here." But Camille, watching from the media control room, gave a small nod. The screens behind Sophia flickered, and then the footage began to play. The ballroom fell into complete, breathless silence. The grainy security video showed Sophia, drugged and confused, being led into the hotel freezer. Damon stood at the threshold, hands in his pockets, as she turned and begged him not to leave her. Juliet entered the frame, laughing, and kissed Damon's cheek. He shut the door, locked it, then walked away. Sophia stood still on stage, letting the images speak for themselves. Someone screamed. A champagne glass shattered. "No, no," Juliet whispered, backing away. "This is fake. This is edited." But the damage was already done. Phones lit up across the venue. The video, already pushed to social media by Camille's team, spread like wildfire. Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, news alerts, live feeds. The truth had gone viral in seconds. The entire world was watching, judging, remembering the man who had painted himself as a savior. Juliet turned and bolted, disappearing through a side door, reporters chasing after her. Damon lunged at the stage, but security intercepted him, holding him back as he shouted at Sophia. "You think you can ruin me with lies? You think anyone will believe you over me?" But no one was listening to him anymore. All eyes were on her. Sophia waited until the screen went black. Then she turned back to the microphone, every inch of her bathed in light, her voice unwavering. "You built your empire on ice," she said. Coldness, silence, cruelty. You tried to freeze me out. You left me to die. She took a breath, scanning the stunned crowd. But I turned your ice into fire. The audience erupted. Not in applause. In shock. In awe. In rage. Not at her, but at the man they had once worshipped. The illusion had shattered. The legend was burned to ash. Sophia turned and walked off the stage with the same quiet power she had walked on with. She didn't need to look back to know that Damon Carter's empire was crumbling behind her, live, in front of the entire world. The collapse was immediate, brutal, and broadcast across every screen. Within hours of Sophia's live revelation, Damon Carter's empire began to disintegrate like ice under a blowtorch. Major sponsors of Carter Lux withdrew their partnerships. Shareholders called for emergency meetings. Stocks plummeted. His board members issued public statements condemning him, claiming ignorance and demanding a full investigation. The police, now flooded with public pressure and undeniable video evidence, reopened Sophia's case, this time not as a missing persons report or a mental health concern, but as an attempted murder investigation. News vans camped outside Damon's penthouse. Protesters gathered outside Carter Lux properties with signs reading, "Believe her," and "Frozen but not forgotten." Juliet, faced with potential prison time and a complete collapse of her social status, cracked. She turned herself in within days, handing over text messages, audio recordings, and email exchanges between her and Damon. In one recording, Damon coolly said, "No one will believe her. She's just a pregnant woman with a wild imagination." The prosecution built its case quickly, and the trial began within weeks. The courtroom was packed with reporters, activists, and silent supporters of Sophia. She sat at the witness stand, holding her composure with quiet grace. Her baby girl, now a few months old, waited with Peter and Lillian in the hallway. When asked if she still feared Damon, Sophia didn't hesitate. "No. Not anymore," she said. "He had power over me when I stayed silent. That power is gone." Her testimony was clear, unwavering, and devastating. The jury took less than 2 hours to convict. Damon was sentenced to 25 years in prison for attempted murder, conspiracy, and aggravated abuse. The world watched as he was handcuffed in the same designer suit he had worn to the awards show, the one where he thought he'd be crowned an icon. His expression, once smug and composed, was now blank, stripped of control. Outside the courthouse, Sophia stepped into the sunlight, her newborn in her arms, wrapped in a soft yellow blanket. Cameras flashed. Journalists called her name. But she didn't speak. She didn't need to. She had already said everything that mattered. The lake shimmered under the soft glow of a spring morning, the surface calm, unbroken, reflecting the quiet strength of the woman who now called this place home. Sophia sat on the porch of her modest yet beautiful cottage, her daughter in her lap, wrapped in a fleece blanket with tiny stars stitched along the edges. Birds chirped in the trees, and the scent of lavender drifted through the air from the garden she had planted with her own hands. This was peace, earned, unshakable. Life had changed in extraordinary ways since the trial. Sophia had declined countless talk shows, book deals, and exclusive interviews. Instead, she used her voice to create something lasting, a foundation called From Ice to Light, dedicated to helping women escape abuse, find safety, and rebuild. The organization offered shelter, legal aid, counseling, and a platform for unheard voices. Every donation, every outreach event, every tear-filled letter from survivors was a reminder that her story hadn't just ended in a courtroom, it had sparked something bigger. That morning, a sleek car pulled up to the edge of her driveway, and Luke Adams stepped out. The young TV producer who had believed in her story when no one else did, who had helped coordinate every second of the exposé, now carried a camera bag in one hand and a bouquet of wildflowers in the other. He smiled at her from across the yard, a little unsure, a little hopeful. "Still like jasmine tea?" he asked with a smirk. Sophia laughed softly. "Only if you brewed it yourself." They sat together on the porch, the baby gurgling between them. They spoke of everything, how From Ice to Light was expanding, how Sophia's face was now on murals in cities across the country, how Damon Carter's downfall had inspired dozens of women to come forward. Luke's hand brushed hers lightly, unintentionally, or maybe not. Then her daughter reached up, pointed at Luke, and babbled, "Hi." It was her first word. Sophia's heart swelled. She looked at her daughter, then at Luke, then out at the lake. The storm had passed. The cold was gone. And in its place, the first flickers of warmth, of healing, of something new, something real, had begun to take root. The world no longer saw Sophia as a victim. They saw her as a legend. The memoir hit shelves under a title that echoed through headlines around the world, Frozen Alive. Within 24 hours, it topped bestseller lists in over 30 countries. Raw, fearless, and unfiltered, the book chronicled Sophia's entire journey, from the golden cage of her marriage to the freezing horror of her near death, to the blaze of her public revenge. But more than that, it became a manifesto for survival, for resistance, for rebirth. Sophia donated every cent of her profits to trauma recovery centers and shelters worldwide. New chapters of From Ice to Light sprang up in cities she'd never even visited, run by women who had once lived in shadows but now stood tall in her legacy. Survivors found not only support in her words, but strength, hope, a reason to believe in life beyond pain. A year to the day after Damon Carter's conviction, a crowd gathered outside the original shelter Sophia had founded. Cameras flashed, voices murmured, but all fell silent as a silk covering was lifted to reveal a bronze statue, a life-size Sophia, standing tall with her baby on her hip, looking outward with fierce grace. At the base were the words, "She melted the silence. She lit the world." Sophia stood beside the statue, her real daughter in her arms, now a giggling toddler with wide, curious eyes. A reporter stepped forward through the crowd, voice trembling as she asked, "Do you have any message for women who feel powerless? Who are still frozen in fear?" Sophia glanced down at her daughter, then back at the camera. Her expression was calm, collected, a blend of softness and steel. She didn't need a microphone. Her words carried anyway. "Never let anyone silence your fire," she said, a knowing spark in her eyes. "Even ice melts."